Welcome to the English Out Loud podcast, a podcast where I give you tips on how you can enhance your spoken English. This is, of course, a podcast ideal for English learners who wanna step things up a notch, who wanna take things further in their spoken English skills. Today I've got a real treat for my listeners. I've got here a friend of mine from across the pond. Her name is Lorraine, and she's the founder of the Intrepid English School. We've been in contact for a few weeks now, and we're working together on some stuff, and it's coming along quite nicely, actually. So this episode is just a big conversation between the two of us. We talk about our own experiences, what inspires us to teach others English. And also, I give a few tips on pronunciation as well, like I do. Here is episode 52, a chat with Lorraine.
Yep. Hi Patrick, how are you today?
Hi Lorraine, I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for joining me today, and I'm joining you as well. So this is a bit of a joint effort today, isn't it, Patrick?
Yeah, we'll both be sharing this for all of our listeners to hear.
Exactly. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners and tell them who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name's Pat. I'm from Toronto, from Canada. I'm an accent coach. I teach the American accent. Now, you may be saying, why is he teaching the American accent? He's from Toronto. Well, it's a pretty similar accent, actually. In Canada, we have our vowels stretched out a little bit differently, but for the most part, they're indistinguishable, especially in the major cities. I live in Mexico. I teach the American accent online. Many people ask me if I have Mexican students, and in the past, I have students around here in Mexico. It's just, honestly, I find working online to be so much easier than running around in the hot sun all day in leather shoes trying to work with students here. It's quite a job living around here. Yeah, that's me. That's the short version. That's what I'm doing these days. But how about you, Lorraine, if you'd like to introduce yourself to my listeners? Tell me about yourself a little.
Yeah, sure. So I have an English language school, also online. We've been running for 7.5 years now. It's called Intrepid English. And we have lots of lovely teachers working for us. We've got some Brits, we've got a couple of Americans, and group is growing steadily. We've now even got a few non-native English-speaking teachers and one South African as well. So we've got a nice big mixed bag. And yeah, I've been teaching English online for 7.5 years, teaching English in total for 10. During that time, it's changed a lot, and now we've got the pandemic going on. So yeah, there's been a huge evolution in the time that I've known the online English language industry. So yeah, it's really nice to meet other English language teachers online. I always learn something from other people who are doing this. And yeah, I was really keen to get chatting with you because I don't know any other uniquely accent coaches, so they only teach accents. So I thought it'd be great to have you on my podcast and also for me to be on yours, because it's something that my students are quite interested in, and I'd like to hear from an expert, essentially.
Actually, I'm happy to give some tips today that are useful for all accents, like whether you're in the States or if you're in Britain or even, Scotland or Australia or wherever. There are some sounds, of course, that are consistent through all of English. I'll give a few tips on some exercises for glottal T. I'll give some tips on that today because honestly, it's, like I said, it's used in all these different accents, and a lot of non-native speakers don't even know about it. They I'll notice a lot of people overly stress their T's. Like, you're not listening for sounds that aren't there. You know what I mean? And this is kind of a T sound that isn't really a T sound. So anyway, I'll get into that shortly. I wanted to mention one thing, though, actually. About, you mentioned as well, you've got non-native teachers, and I think it's so good. Native teachers are great at teaching more advanced level stuff. What I find is when you're at levels of, suppose you want to study IELTS or the TOEFL test or any of that kind of stuff, who better to learn it from than somebody who's written it themselves, possibly more than once, or who's studied for it specifically. Native English teachers, we don't study these things in the same way that other people do. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I think that's such a cool thing that you've got such a diverse group working with you there.
This is such a great topic to start us off with, Patrick, because it's something that has really been in both the Intrepid English Academy discussion this week. It's also been in a discussion that I had whilst recording another podcast with our newest teacher. And when I shared the podcast on LinkedIn, that started a whole conversation on there as well. So this is obviously a very hot topic. Of course, there are a range of different opinions about this topic, but I definitely agree with your point to a certain extent here. Non-native English-speaking teachers and native English-speaking teachers, there are so many of them that you can't overgeneralize both ways. But non-native English-speaking teachers who are qualified and experienced really have, really are better than native English-speaking teachers in a lot of ways, especially for lower-level English students. That's not overgeneralizing. We've got a lot of native English-speaking teachers who really haven't learned their skills very well. They haven't learned their craft to a good degree. They kind of just cruise by and rely on the fact that they're a native English teacher. And honestly, that's not great. So I'm saying, I would say my opinion is that you need to take each teacher on their own value. You know, you need to take a look at their skills, their qualifications, their personality, their passion, also their pronunciation as well. That's important. But there has unfortunately been, in recent years, a lot of schools have been advertising for English teachers and they say for native English teachers only. And that is a real shame. And some countries have actually made that illegal now. But it is a real shame because they deprive the school, they deprive the students, and they deprive the non-native English teachers themselves of really valuable experiences, you know. I don't think that you can say, oh, a native English speaker can teach because that's their native language. That's not right in most cases. Some of the best English teachers I've ever met have been non-native English speaking teachers and also native English speaking teachers who have learned the grammar from scratch in order to teach it. So, yeah, it's a complicated issue, but I would say that hopefully things are moving in the right direction where schools are allowing non-native English speakers to apply for these jobs. And, yeah, they're taken on their unique individual values rather than on just their native language.
And, well, not to mention you've got the people such as yourself leading the way in that. Maybe you could have a school full of skilled English teachers who are native speakers and who studied English thoroughly and all these things. But having non-native speakers as teachers, they bring a new perspective to it. They'll teach things, like teaching, in my opinion anyway, I've come to find teaching is so much about how well you can communicate the message.
In all of the things that we do at Intrepid English, we always like to communicate as a team together. And we chat all the time online with each other so that we can share stories, funny stories, useful things, even mistakes that we've made and that we've learned from. And it's really so important to have a variety of different perspectives, because it makes us all better. It makes us all see things from maybe a different point of view than we're used to. So, yeah, I think that diversity in all its forms is wonderful and we should definitely celebrate it.
Helps, just piece things together much better. And well, I'm curious for you, how did you get into teaching in the first place? Like, what piqued your interest in this type of work?
I was actually working in Germany. I was living in Germany. I honestly couldn't find a job because my German language skills were so poor. I was working for a short time in a shop called the English Shop in Cologne, because that was the only job that I could get for a while. It was, it was really quite difficult to find a job without the necessary German language skills. I kind of accidentally fell into teaching English. See, I didn't want to go into it without any expertise or any qualifications, although as a native speaker, as we've just discussed, I could have just started teaching, and the only qualification I needed was that I was from Britain. But I went to train. I realised I had no idea about English grammar whatsoever. So I studied for a few months and then did a CELTA course in Hamburg in Germany. And I fell in love with teaching during my CELTA course, which was very intense and very challenging at times, but it was just like turning a light on in my mind. I was so comfortable and so happy to do that. And I started working as an English teacher immediately the day I got back from my CELTA course. Yeah, I never looked back, but after a few years of teaching face-to-face in businesses and one-to-ones in Germany, I moved back to the UK and set up my own business. So, yeah, I've been teaching ever since then. But, it's absolutely my vocation in life, I think. So, how about you, Patrick? How did you get into teaching English?
Well, around here, what got me into teaching in the first place was, coming to Mexico. My first time here, I was volunteering, and I was just mostly doing community work, but then they started an after-school program for some local schools in the area, local. And I got in there, and I saw that it was pretty much a babysitting program. It was pretty much just hang out with these kids until their parents are out of work. And it's like, okay, that's good. We had fun with the kids, and they taught me quite a bit of Spanish. But I wanted to do something more, and so I started kind of writing English classes, just using my own imagination. From the start, I would just do a couple Google searches and, learn a few things of, okay, where to start, and just basic vocabulary of, around the house and to be, and I found I was good at it. I found that even though I had no teaching experience before that, or at least very little, if any, I was really enjoying myself just seeing that I could communicate a message in another language even, and have that person understand me, because my Spanish was very broken at the time. I then went back to Toronto for a little bit, and a friend of mine said, if you want to come back down here for a bit more, you could get a job teaching. And so I got myself set up. I got the work visa and all that, and got set up with a job at a school in this city, Monterey, called Anglo Americano. Very cool school. They teach all different languages. They had French teachers who were from Haiti and from France, and they had Japanese teachers and all this stuff. So I was so amazed to see such, a mixed bunch in Mexico, because most of Mexico, you just get Mexican people. But this was like a very diverse group. And for me, coming from Toronto's like it's a melting pot. Everybody's there. So it almost felt a little at home in that sense, in a way. I didn't feel that I stood out so much because everybody was different. So that was cool. From there, they set me up with materials. And also I took as well a course online to teach. But yeah, once I had my certificate, this school got me set up with materials. And right away I started teaching, and I just had a blast with it. I just found I could turn it on and have this energy going. I remember the first time going into a class, and there was like maybe 20 to 30 people around my age or a little older, just sitting there looking at me, waiting for me to go. And I was like, okay, I better move, or else they're going to feel that they wasted their money. And so I'd start moving and I can't even remember. I was just talking and just having a blast presenting myself in front of these people. And then the teaching started, and that picked up, and I just kept having fun with it from there. And then I started getting my own clients around this city, and that was fun as well. I learned more about teaching, and in the same way, I wanted to make sure I put on a good show and I make people feel that they're getting some good bang for their buck. I want to make sure people are satisfied with their classes. And so doing that, I didn't want to buy materials because I was too cheap. I still am. So I just started making my own teaching materials. And now I've gotten really good at that, I think. And I try to, kind of make stuff that a student could look at it. And even if they don't have me guiding them there, they could, it's got my voice in the materials in a way. So it kind of teaches itself is what I try to write now, is materials that teach themselves.
Brilliant.
But that's how things have developed for me up until this point, where a few months ago I said I got 40 students and I got a real busy schedule, but I'm capped at that. Like, I can't take on any more without getting burnt out. And so I started the podcast. And now here we are, this will be episode 52, actually.
It's isn't it funny? Like, you put in the work every week, get it done, or a couple of times a week, and then all of a sudden you've got loads of episodes, and you look back on it and go, "Wow, I actually have a podcast." We had a similar situation where we've got lots of students, and we wanted to reach more people, but we kind of were limited with the amount of time that we could spend. Yeah, we decided to set up some audio courses for students who need to, this is how I study, right? I need to listen to something while I am moving. This really helps me to absorb information. So I'm thinking if I'm like this, then I'm sure my students are like this. So we've got a lot of self-study courses in our academy for lots of things like business English and grammar and exam preparation and things. But we wanted to do something that the students could listen to without having to be in front of their computer, so they could get out and about. Maybe they could do it while they're washing up or driving to work or something. So we've created some audio courses to do that. Yeah, that's a new thing. It's so important to keep trying new things, isn't it? And expanding your skill set.
Especially, honestly, these days, podcasts are starting to blow up. Like, we've chatted a little on this app Clubhouse as well, and like I'm in a number of podcast groups there where people are talking about developing their podcasts, and there's a lot coming, a lot of really good audio content in the making, a lot of probably not so good stuff too, but that's it, it gets weeded out, and it's so cool because it's like for anybody who's listening to this spoken English or in any language, for one, like you say, you can learn on the go. Like, you can learn while you're walking to the store, or me, I like learning while I just, go for a drive down the highway every now and then. I'll put on a podcast of something. And whether you're doing it to practice your English skills, or if you want to learn about Bitcoin, or if you want to learn about anything, there's so much good content out there for it. And it's like, people got to keep checking it out. Absolutely.
Of you as a podcast listener, I have different podcasts for different moods that I'm in. If I'm going for a run, I like to listen to something really quite political or something that really fires me up, But then I'll often listen to an audiobook or a podcast as I'm falling to sleep because, my crazy mind is going really fast, it's whirring around, and listening to something interesting really helps me to drift off to sleep at the end of the day. So I'll have a very, very different kind of podcast for that. I think it's fantastic, isn't it? Because you can, we all live busy lives now, and we often don't have time to just sit down and do one thing at a time, although multitasking is supposed to be not very good for you, but it's really handy to have something that you can pop in your ears and then get stuff done, but you're learning at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's this passive learning, type of thing. Like, even if you're busy doing something else, like you're working away and you just got a podcast on as background noise, every once in a while you can just, lean back and take a quick break and listen to these people chatting. And you'll just learn. All of a sudden, they'll say something that you think to yourself, okay, that's interesting. And then you go back to work. And that's Yeah, maybe that just like coincidence. There's a probability that might have happened right now to someone. You know, it's
Absolutely. I hadn't thought of it that way.
yeah, exactly.
Cool.
It's so yeah, who knows? Who knows? Although, so I'd like to give just a couple tips on that glottal T.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I do got to get going shortly. The glottal T is the sound that we make in the throat. This is like an unstressed T sound. I'll start out with some examples so that you've got an idea right off the bat. So listen to how I say these words here: gotten, certain, mountain, important. In all those words, they're all 2-syllable words. The first syllable is strong in them. The vowel's pronounced fully. Whereas in the second syllable, it's just kind of an n sound. And the T, which you would think T's like it's a consonant and it's supposed to be pronounced, again, fully, we don't pronounce it. And so that is the kind of habit that a glottal T employs. So I'll explain what does glottal mean in the first place? Well, your glottis is a valve in your throat that's controlled by a muscle, I think. But it's essentially, it controls the air passage in your throat. And so if you say, uh-oh. Can I hear you say that there, Lorraine? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
There you go. That uses your glottis to stop the voice and to start it again. Uh-oh. The glottal T makes the same movement, but a different sound. So follow me in one more thing here. Quick little exercise to say the word certain real clearly. So could I hear you again say, uh-oh?
Uh-oh.
And then, uh-n.
Uh-n.
Now, what you did there is a common difficulty, actually. You said, uh-un. You added a little bit of a vowel sound in there, un. We want to avoid that. We want to get it more just an n, just a straight n sound at the ending.
N.
Even a little more just n.
N.
That's it. That's it. It's such a subtle difference, but it really does make a difference. Like it stands out. And then could I hear you say certain?
Certain.
There you go. You can see how it's important not to say certain, but certain, with just a solid N sound. That's the glottal T.
Thank you, Patrick. That was really great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy you got the hang of it real quick. You're good at it. Yeah, the glottal T, like I mentioned, it's in all accents. I think it's actually, now you could probably tell me better than I know, but from my understanding, it seems to be a sound that comes from like old Germanic, languages. One of English's root languages is the word. It's because I hear, at least from my basic German studying, I noticed that sound came up. And then I noticed that's not a sound that Latin languages have, although we do say Latin with a glottal T. So this leads me to think that this is one of those, Germanic sounds. So that's why you find it in all different accents, because it's not just a particular regional thing, it's actually in the foundation of English.
We often have it in words that have a T followed by a consonant. So, for example, in the word football, we don't say football. That would actually sound a little bit unnatural if you pronounce the T. So we often say football.
Yep.
Yeah, that comes up a lot in British English.
Oh, yeah.
Could you explain to the listeners the difference between the glottal T and the sort of D sound that comes up in American English? So, for example, in British English, we would say, well, some people say bottle, a bottle of water, and that employs the glottal stop. But I hear American English speakers say things like bottle. Can you explain that to me?
That was a good flap T.
No, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. That is what happens. So that we call a flap T. Let me just pull up my flap T notes. The flap T, now, as you just pointed out, because I was able to point out, okay, here's some basic instances of glottal T's, but like English, there's a million other examples of it. Much like the flap T, there are some general rules for it, and then there's a million times that the rules are broken. But here's what it comes down to. When you have a T that's unstressed, similar to the glottal T, also unstressed, but an unstressed T between two vowel sounds, it's going to be a flap T, usually. So, for example, if we look at the word that you said, bottle, or better, those are both getting flap T's because the T is coming between two vowel sounds. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Lorraine, what are you talking about? Two vowel sounds in bottle? Do you know how to spell bottle? Well, I know what you mean. There's an L, of course, in the word bottle. That L is what we would call a dark L. It isn't an L like the word like or lily. That's a light L, li. A dark L makes this sound, oh. And because of that, a flap T is appropriate when it comes before an L, because we would make it dull, bottle, instead of bottle kind of thing. You hear how that sounds awkward?
Yeah.
Bottle.
Yeah, this is particularly difficult for a lot of our Japanese English learners because the dark L is very similar in mouth position to the R, whereas the light L is very different. So unfortunately, that can cause a bit of a problem when Japanese, for example, Japanese learners of English try to pronounce the dark L that sometimes comes out sounding like an R. So yeah, we often take quite a while on those particular sounds so that they can hear the difference. We'll work on mouth positioning and things like that. But even so, this is for British English. We're working on the British English pronunciation here. And it's used slightly differently in American English. And it sounds slightly different as well. So, yeah, it's really important that you focus on the type of pronunciation for the target accent that you're working on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find the American accent, I've never honestly compared the two until I've been listening to you use dark L's just now. But I agree with you, though, fully. Yeah, there are things that are consistent through English. Many consonant sounds are going to be the same no matter where you are, except like H, because you get H over where you're from. But yeah, for the most part, you want to definitely, when it comes to vowels and stress, you want to focus on an accent. So flap T's, where you would say bottle, I'd say bottle, or data, or instead of New York City, I'll say New York City. It's all about the intonation in the way that we make the stress of the words, and just, well, if you listen closely and you want to develop an American accent, the flap T is all over the place, and you'll start catching it if you start really noticing it.
Great.
And also, if you listen to, I got a couple episodes on the flap T myself.
Wonderful.
So,
I'm going to put the link to those episodes in the episode notes for this podcast. So, our listeners can read that. You're also kindly writing a guest blog for us, aren't you, Patrick?
I am indeed. Up to this point, I've got a few notes, but a guest blog is my ambition. I was thinking, I guess we haven't discussed much when we'll start, but I was thinking within May, my goal before the end of May is to have at least 4 blog posts made. And I am actually super happy to have the opportunity to be doing that, because then, well, hey, your listeners who are hearing me now are going to be able to check that out and learn a little about American accent. And my listeners will also be able to check that out because, well, you mentioning the blog before has inspired me to think like, hey, I do need to be starting a blog for myself here.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Oh, yeah, because it helps you pop up on Google, and I really enjoy writing. Why have I not started? And I mean,
it's also really helpful for listeners to see a transcript of your podcast. So what we normally do with our blogs is we write the blog first and then we'll record it into a podcast. But that way we'll put the recording into the blog and the students can listen and read at the same time. And that way it's really, really helpful for them to absorb the information.
Oh, that's a good idea. I paid for one transcription thing on the hosting service I use, and it's good, but it seems to be about the quality of YouTube's.
Yeah, I would do it the other way around. I'd write first and then record it. It's up to you. Obviously, everyone does it in a different way. But if you need any help at all, Patrick, then please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you out getting set up. It's lovely to have a different perspective on our blogs, and if I can help you get yours up and running, then by all means, let me know.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear that. Yeah, most definitely. Well, we'll be working on that together, and certainly I will have some. I'll have some great writing for you in the days to come. But I do got to get going for today because, I got to grab some lunch before my first class. Yeah. Do you have any closing questions or any statements you'd like to say to my listeners or yours or anything like that?
Not really. Okay, I think that's everything for today, Patrick. I really appreciate you taking the time to teach my listeners about the glottal T. And one last thing to mention is that we're both doing some collaborations in Clubhouse. So you and I each have our own unique processes and specialties. And I have a room on a Tuesday night, that's British summertime, Tuesday night at 7:00. Where I teach IELTS speaking preparation skills. So each week we have a different unit and we're covering the top 10 topics for the IELTS speaking part of the exam. And what are you doing at Clubhouse at the moment? You're doing American accent and muscle memory, aren't you?
So far I've just made 2 rooms. One of them only you showed up in, actually. The other one, I had a handful of people show up. But I'll be on there giving tips. I mean, similar to the glottal T. I was actually talking about the glottal T on there yesterday. I'll be talking about the stress of speech. I'll be talking about different vowel sounds and how we stretch them out. Like, notice how I say sounds. Sounds. It's so strange. Could you say that same word there? Sounds.
Sounds.
You see, you don't stretch it out in the same way.
No, mine's a diphthong there. Yeah, it's the ow in cow. That comes directly after this sounds.
Exactly. Whereas I do use that same diphthong in cow or out or about, but when I add an N after those, then I kind of modify it a little bit. I make it aoun, sounds. I know, right? So that's the kind of habit that I want to help people build if they want to get that, kind of American sound in their speech. So
in British English, we call it a twang, the American twang. It's like kind of almost like you're playing a stringed instrument in a way. It's got that kind of resonance to it. It does take quite a lot of practice, but you're certainly the person to ask if that's your goal.
Indeed. Anybody interested in learning more about the American accent, well, check me out on Clubhouse. Check out the podcast. I'm making these episodes. I try to do 2 a week. Every now and then I slip up and I make 1 a week. But for the most part, I've been consistent, 2 a week. And I'm just going to keep pumping these things out. So check me out.
Great, wonderful. And for anyone interested in learning any British English, the website address link will be in the episode notes. It's intrepidenglish.co.uk.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful talking with you today, Lorraine, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Patrick. Have a wonderful weekend.